Recording. Hi, everyone. Welcome or welcome back. So, why literature will be the title of this video. This is hopefully one of those videos that would be a better starting point for viewers of my channel. A better conceptual starting point, because I will be touching on what I'm up to in general with the channel, what I've been trying to do, my motivations, my concerns. Why is it that I started 4 or 5 years ago posting videos on YouTube? At that time, I was still an academic, and now I'm not, but I'm still, I still have this drive. Maybe that's a strong word. I still feel inclined to post occasionally videos on YouTube. But when I do, I feel like I am usually I'm starting in the middle of a discussion. As much as I try to start from the beginning, I tend to start in the middle. And that confuses people. I become aware of this when I listen to people, when I hear feedback, especially from people who are in my life in some other ways. And then they are aware of my YouTube channel and they watch a few videos and they talk about what I'm doing in a way that I don't really recognize it. So I'm now turning to a question that is important in its own right, but it is also important because it might provide me with an occasion to discuss in a fresh way my more basic motivations. So, why literature? And I'm talking about why literature from my personal perspective. And there's an inevitable element of autobiography in this. And I must also admit that I am an amateur when it comes to literature, as much as I love this field, this area, this thing that is called literature. So my background, academic background, is or was in cognitive psychology, cognitive neuroscience. And I completed my PhD in experimental cognitive psychology at the University of Toronto. Then when I finished that, I was a postdoctoral fellow at Leiden University for a year. After that, I taught psychology for 5 years at the University of Macau. So a total of 11 years in academia. Now I'm out and I work other industries, non-academic, outside of academia. I wrote papers during those 11 years on different topics in cognitive science: perceptual prediction, actions influencing our attention, interactions between memory systems and attention. And I also read a lot of articles, as you might expect, because when you write, you have to rely on the background of existing research and what other people have said about a topic or a question. So I read a lot, and I noticed as I was reading, and as I would sometimes listen to colleagues, their presentations, I started to notice their style. And I became increasingly preoccupied with style, with how somebody approaches the audience, how somebody approaches the topic, how they begin talking, what kinds of things they emphasize, what sort of things they go over, ignore, actively or maybe implicitly. A good example of this, which you can find online on YouTube, is a debate, a kind of conversation or debate between Mark Solms and Lisa Feldman-Barrett. That's a good reference point for me. I actually have a video on that. It's available through Patreon only. I hesitated to share it with the public, but so there's a debate. Mark Solms, Feldman-Barrett. They are talking about the nature of emotions, the development of emotions, and it doesn't matter as much for the purpose of our discussion here now. It doesn't matter whose side we are on, whose side we sympathize with more. I found that as I was listening to Mark and Lisa, that before I come to an agreement with one of them, I I agree with Mark Soames' style of engagement. I find something right in the way he engages with language, with words, how he moves from an introductory space in a conversation to progressing further into a specific question. And he seemed to be more present there in that conversation. He wasn't making references to points outside the conversation. But if you pay attention to Lisa Feldman Barrett's style of talking, presenting in that debate, you would find that, as I did, first of all, her style is, to me personally, I'm just trying to convey my sensitivity to this element of style. Listening to her, for me, is very similar to listening to nails scratching on the chalkboard. There's a visceral reaction that I feel in myself that it's difficult to even stand that. She makes a lot of references to authorities, her own authority. She talks about the number of publications that she's had. When Mark gives a summary of her book, she says, "Oh, I wrote my book for lay people. You shouldn't judge my attitude or my position based on a book that I write for people outside of my field. That's not how I really talk and how I really think. My thinking is very sophisticated." And she would also make references to a lot of different people. She would say, "I use consciousness the way this person uses it. I use this feeling, affect, the way this other person uses it." And everything was attached to a name and an authority outside of the conversation. And there was a difference in affect. If you pay attention to how they are feeling, the extent to which they are calm, or they are expressing a level of discomfort or annoyance or frustration. So ultimately, if you're attentive to these, that's just an example. You can think of your own. You can think of people that you listen to on YouTube. That sometimes you might find that you're not as interested in topic. You're interested in how a person talks more than what they are talking about, and vice versa. You might be very interested in certain topics, but you can't stand how somebody talks about it. It becomes very unfortunate in the domain of teaching, because kids in a classroom, they don't have as much say in who is there, who happens to teach them literature or math or physics or chemistry or French on a given year. And the style of a teacher, if the student is sensitive to style, might turn them off from a topic, from a subject. Anyways, I'm back to me talking to you. I'm saying that ultimately, if you're attentive to these style elements, there is, I think, a good chance that you'd be attentive to literary forms, and you would have an appreciation. If you haven't discovered that, you would enjoy good literature, and you would want to move away from bad writing to good writing, and maybe an appreciation that wants to become more and more self-conscious and articulate itself, talking about why it is that we like good writing, good patterns, good forms, and what it is that we don't appreciate about bad writing. On this topic, there is a really good book, Better Living Through Criticism. Better Living Through Criticism, which I spent a few weeks discussing with my reading group. In science, I said I have a PhD in cognitive science, and I taught for a few years, and I was an active member of a research community. And there's problems, and people diagnose problems of science differently. For some people, the problems of science are statistical problems. Maybe they might argue that we have problems in psychological science because we are mishandling effect size or statistical power, or maybe we are not putting enough effort on replicability. That's why we have a replicability crisis. Or maybe some people might say we're not interdisciplinary enough, which is something I would sympathize with, or we're not relevant enough to actual concerns or needs or problems in society, problems that people are struggling with outside of a research domain. For me, a big part of problems in psychological science or cognitive science, cognitive psychology, was it always came back to the problem of style. It's not just a matter of I don't like somebody's style because it's just my taste. It's not just that. It doesn't stop there. I think that's just a symptom. Somebody who has a strict attitude towards their scientific research, if they are not open-minded enough, if they're more concerned with ego, if for them science becomes entangled with their narcissism, of course that's going to come out. Of course you're going to see that in the way they talk about their research. If they have some personal insecurity, if they have some cynicism about life, world, people in general, if they're pessimistic, if they hate people, if they might say things like, "Oh, that's just a book I wrote for dummies. Don't judge me based on that book." Anyways, that's how I came to literature, how literature became important for me personally. It became a place of refuge, place where I found myself more comfortable. I felt comforted, and there's a bittersweet feeling because you read a passage, you read a paragraph. Yesterday, we were discussing. We're almost done discussing George Eliot's Scenes of Clerical Life, and there is a paragraph in the third story there that contains so much insight on moral psychology and human activity and our capacity for action. And I said to the people there that I'm impressed of how much George Eliot is accomplishing, and I'm reminded of my own PhD dissertation and the research around that, research that I was reading at the time, and how little contribution they make compared to just one paragraph of good literature. So let's, with that background, now 14 minutes. Okay, let's talk for a couple more minutes. Because I also want to talk a little bit about what else literature does. What else does it do? I mean, it's difficult to capture the whole thing, but for me, what I'm focusing on is the fact that literature makes us aware. It makes us more aware. It prepares us to see things. It helps us become more receptive. And especially what I have in mind is realist literature as exemplified by people like George Eliot and Charles Dickens. But you can, I think, get comparable effects. The effect of becoming aware, becoming sensitized or sensitive from modernist literature too. Like Waiting for Godot. Listening to the conversations there in that play for a second time, third time, fourth time, you start noticing more and more about this type of relationship, for example, that someone described as a pseudo couple in Waiting for Godot. How two people are depending on each other at the same time, being annoyed with each other and want to be independent, but do they really want to? Yes, they do. A part of them wants to, but this kind of dynamic, or how they see a sadomasochistic pattern of relationship with the other, the other two characters, relatively secondary characters, and they at some point later in the play, I recall, if you have seen the play or have read it, they try to imitate that. They try to imitate sadomasochism as a way to pass time. And why is that? What is the draw in that? So Sartre believed that literature can cultivate a sense of human freedom. It's a medium, it's a place for the exercise of freedom, both for the writers and for the readers. And I've discussed this in my Beginning Theory series. I see theory also as an extension of that aim, the aim of cultivating human freedom. Because theoretical frameworks also give us a place to go and a vantage point to see works of literature. Reading literature also helps us make sense of attitudes, make sense of our judgments, to see, for example, how a particular loneliness can come about, how misunderstandings come about, how this feeling of feeling out of place, how can that take form? What is the developmental process of somebody feeling out of place? I'm not saying that every work of literature that touches on that theme of out of placeness traces the development of it, but it can be done. So, for example, in one of the books that I've discussed on the channel, The Bee Sting, Paul Murray, in Bee Sting, we get these four characters, these four family members, Cass, PJ, Imelda, Dickie, and we come to understand each of their individual places, each individual place within the family, the way they belong and the way they feel alone, the way they feel connected and the way they feel disconnected. And we get glimpses of the history of that. Now, just for a parent, if a parent is aware of these dynamics, if a parent has literary sensibility and responsiveness cultivated through literary forms, they will not want to force their children out of any of these modes. They would be understanding. They would see the primacy of understanding as opposed to forcing kids to be connected to the family. It's a huge difference, and that difference can become visible through good literature. Good literature helps us understand something, partly as a result of seeing the development of it. The development of a child, for example, within a family, growing up, adopting certain stances. The Thibaults, Le Thibault, and the loneliness of Jacques, arguably the central character in the novel. He's the development of his loneliness. It's a great novel, The Thibaults, but unfortunately not as accessible in English. Okay, occasionally good literature also answers questions by showing. It helps us understand something. For example, in my own personal history of reading, I remember reading The Unbearable Lightness of Being, the great work by Milan Kundera. And in that work, the main character, the main male character, has this relationship with life that is essentially hedonistic. He has adopted the hedonistic philosophy, hedonism, pleasure, living a life of pleasure as much as possible. And I didn't know where that comes from. What is that about? What is that a response to? Is it just an accident, a contingent fact of a life that, or can it be argued for? Did he come to that position philosophically? That hedonism is the best response, and let me show you with an argument. Then I later read The Joke, earlier novel by Kundera, and it helped me understand the emergence of hedonism in Kundera's writing. And maybe I'm wrong, I should still be open to revising that, but that comes from the understanding itself. The understanding remains open when it is based on literature. See, that's another point. It is very difficult to be a harsh judge if you have a relationship with good literature. It's hard to become an egomaniacal person, an egomaniac, by reading literature. With philosophy, it's easy. Somehow, with philosophy, people become egomaniacal more easily. With science, it's even easier. You can say things like, I wrote that book for dummies. Why? Again, I speculate that it's because of that cutoff, being cut off from the reflective attitude that the literary style can afford. When we cut off from that attentiveness to the process, to changes in our judgment, when we just see a judgment as, just take it as face value, see it as something there corresponding to a state of affairs, without itself, the judgment, being connected to, or the thing being judged being connected to other things, being caused or causing other things. When we are cut off from an attention to style, we can become very judgmental, we can become very egotistical, egomaniacal, and so on. Okay, I've said a few things. If you have any questions, if you have directions that you would like to take this discussion in those directions, feel free to let me know in the comments below this video. If you have your own answers about why literature, please share them. I'd love to read your responses to the question, why literature? If literature has done something for you, anything, expected or unexpected, I'm curious. And it's interesting that with literature, it's easier to be an amateur, while at the same time, the horizon is so open. You can go as far, as deep as you like. Though, if you don't have that much time, you can just go this much. You can read, a couple of works by Hemingway, a couple of works by Dickens, maybe a work by Virginia Woolf. You can read George Eliot. You can start modestly, and that's a really good thing. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you for listening if you have stayed with me this long, and I will speak with you in future videos, and I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Thank you.